This is Vibe Check with Zach and Kris.
Welcome back to Vibe Check with Zach and Kris, live from Cartoon Reality Studios in beautiful Linwood, California. We are very excited because this might be, please keep working, you're doing a good job.
We've tried to film this this podcast for quite some time, and every time it failed. Now we have a new camera, and we hope it lasts to the end of this conversation.
Or at the very least for the next minute. We'll take that. Is the lens cap off? Yep, lens cap
is off.
Microphone looks like it's functional.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Vibe Check with Zach and Kris. This is episode 4.
4, yeah. And what we're going to talk about today is art. And I hate saying the word art because it makes me feel like I'm in a museum. And I don't like I like being in art museums, but it's like not really what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, they put a weird spin on the idea of art, and that's kind of, I think, why they've defunded it.
Yeah, it's a elite thing. That's what art museums become. They become elite things. And they even show, well, sometimes the artists are elite, but sometimes they're not. But either way, the word museum is very much a distant thing. And but the truth is that art is open to everybody, and it must be open to everybody.
And there's many, many forms of art. It's not just, obviously paintings in a museum.
Yeah, and as nice as they are, these other forms that we're going to get into are just as beautiful and complex. Because what we're going to talk about is why art is crucial, not just to have a functional society filled with enlightened people who are very expressive, but actually because it is the cleanest and direct channel of our soul into this world and back.
I agree.
And it also has this amazing ability to communicate the desires, the truths, the deepest things within ourselves to other people, even when we're away from them, even when we're not performing in front of them.
Exactly.
We're capitalizing on the forms and the beautiful universal truths within them to be read by another person, not purely as words, but also just as the pure depth of the concepts themselves, which is intense.
Yeah, music is one of the most powerful things. Art, not just music, any artistic form is extremely powerful because any creative force coming from a human, we touched on the power of imagination in the last episode.
Yeah.
Any creative force coming from a human, whether it be like, say, painting or drawing or something like that, or singing or writing, just getting out pure emotion and then being able to redigest what you just created and learn from it, because it was the purest expression of something that was bothering you or that you felt inside of you, and now that you've got it outside of you, instead of just running the problem over and over and over inside, you can literally have an outside force to judge off of.
Yeah, it's interesting you say it that way because art has this therapeutic ability. So let's go into what therapy actually is. Therapy is not just the process of feeling good.
Yeah.
Right? Nothing about art is really just supposed to suggest feeling good versus feeling bad. I mean, if that was the case, art wouldn't be part of the conversation at all. It would just be like drugs or no drugs.
Yeah.
Because that's where that would be.
Yeah.
So art is not exactly about feeling good or feeling bad. Therapy itself is about resolving complex problems within ourselves that we don't have the natural or necessary ability in certain levels of our consciousness of being able to resolve. That's what it can be. So when you're expressing things through art, you're allowing this deeper consciousness that is capable, that is intelligent, and actually is further up within yourself to be able to see all the things that have been bothering you in a sort of deeper format that you can't really put into words, and let that resolve into itself. And then the beautiful thing about art is that it's so much closer into this world than just pure imagination, as we talked about before, or the will and desire of our soul. It actually is easily communicable through the eyes and ears, and then reprocessed into the deeper form that it came from, which gives us new insight, because sometimes the way that it's written is not the way that it's read, but both have significance because they're both touching on deep, complex forms and functions. And so that's incredible. We finally found the first doorway from the deepest will of ourselves, the desire of our souls, the will of, or the presence of God, into a form that's not just, oh, I'm feeling it, or I'm imagining it, I'm in this world. It's the closest thing you're going to get to having something this deep be this understood, this read into, and this expressed. And people who don't like art don't like the ability of ourselves to communicate from deep within ourselves.
There are a lot of people who are detached from their inner will and just go along not processing all of the things they've been going through, so they're not gaining all of that extra knowledge that you get by digesting your emotional issues. Like you as a human being, the more you digest your feelings and work them out, if you can logically work out irrational feelings, you become smarter.
You become smart. You become more capable of being your own being and not being beholden to a banal, competitive, thoughtless society. One of my sort of thought experiments on this actually has to do with my experience in Israel, which is that Israel and certain other countries I can name, not just Israel by any means, they are really obsessed. Now, there are parts of all these societies I'm thinking of that are very artistic, very beautiful, very expressive of the self. But a lot of the societies that I find to be more on the authoritarian side, they also have people less comfortable with expressing anything but their own strength or power in their society. So, like, the men or the women, like, they don't express a precise gender like they might in Europe or America. They stick to what they believe is the height of masculinity or the height of femininity. Stick to that not because it's who they are, but because it's the only thing that matters in a society where power and competition are the only thing. So by sticking to these things, by having this perfect image, they have the ability to survive in that society because everyone around them says to them, like, either you do this or you're a loser and excluded. And the more authoritarian kinds of people try to generate a society like this and take advantage of a society like this, because people who are being forced to only exist and express and actually internalize a very one-dimensional form of existence is a place where, you know, there's no evaluation of that authoritarian leadership, except for, are they being the most masculine? Are they being the most feminine? Are they being how do they have the most money? Do they have the most power? When people aren't allowed in a society collectively to have nuance in how they express themselves and to have like the power game of like being the most handsome, filled, you know, rich, whatever, when that power game dies down and people are allowed to express themselves and they let art flourish as a normal thing in that society, authoritarians don't get anywhere. Because think about it. If you can imagine the most artistic authoritarian who can you imagine a leader of a society who is elected in a society where people don't get a say in the matter, who is elected because they have like the deepest art? It just wouldn't make any sense.
It's true.
That's how powerful art is in permeating a society, because it's a layer of existence that a society can collectively open up to.
And it grows the society by being able to open up to those areas of expression, because then when people are more able to express themselves, then they become more communicable with everybody else. They're having more conversations. They're able to speak their mind and get their words across the way that they need to, which is the most important thing when your society is developing. If you're trying to develop the society, like if you want it to get better and become a more united society, that's
where people actually speak to each other,
yes,
and can be honest to a certain extent.
Can be honest.
Art is like a field of expression where honesty is prized, not devalued. Mm-hmm. You know, it actually makes me think of the weird phenomenon in wealthier people's houses where they have conversation pieces, like things that are intentionally weird because otherwise, like, so that a person can point them out and say, "Oh, that's weird." Like, that's a good thing, because otherwise what they end up talking about is, like, the weather or whatever. And so, like, everyone, like, people who actually want to enjoy their time with other people, if they will consciously find ways to break the norms just enough to allow people to be more open about themselves without having to resort to alcohol, which in a way opens you up to yourself, but it will very rarely open you up to a higher self. Unless you're in an exact situation.
It might take away your inhibitions and make you be a little more of your human self, your honest human self, but you're not going to remember that experience enough to learn anything from it. Most of the time.
And
unless
you're
really, really gentle on the alcohol.
And you're right. I mean, and what you might be open with are parts of yourself that you'd rather be resolving in private than, like, spreading it in public. Like,
you bring things to the surface that you really don't need to bring to the surface in public. You should do that amongst your close friends at home.
Right. And this is because art, just like imagination, can take you in, like, the expression and figuring out and the communication of our darker aspects that are struggling with the limitations of this world. But also, as I said, it's worth having this ability despite the negative places it can latch onto and express. And I mean, sometimes it's a positive thing to be able to work these things out because it's a part of us and it's necessary. But we can't forget how implaceable art, imagination, anything is from the ability to channel from a higher place.
Yeah.
I think of a couple of experiences I've had in both my waking and sleeping life, where I remember singing at a synagogue after a cantor died, actually, in a tragic way. And I was chanting from the Book of the Prophets, one of the books, and my voice reached this clarity and this pitch that I'm not actually physically capable of producing. And it was with this clarity, it was with this energy. I felt like I was completely absent from what was going on. Like, I was basically half blacked out as I was doing it. And everyone in the synagogue afterwards was, like, literally embracing me afterwards. Because I was not present, my soul had the opportunity to be present in that situation. I actually was able to make such an entrance into the physical world that it changed my voice and what I was even able to express. And that's one of the examples I learned that in the right situations, art is not just a therapy for the self. It's not just a deeper exploration of concepts. At a certain end of existence, it's just a pure channel of something that can't exist and be shared with other people unless that channel is open.
Yep.
And I learned also that, no, it's not just a coincidence that this physical thing happened. I remember having a dream where I was singing around the table with my family. This was a dream. And we sang in harmonies that were so fast moving and so perfect that I've never been able to hear it reproduced in our physical world.
Huh.
And it was an extremely vivid dream. And it's not the only dream of that I had.
Yeah.
And it speaks to Plato, who said, all things that you see, this table, this microphone, any of these things, these are imperfect versions of the perfect things that exists in a higher realm. And so music, too, even though it is so present in this world,
Yeah.
has an aspect of a perfect self that in either large part or small part, we are taking. We are not creating, we're taking from another world and bringing it into this one. And what, in a world without the ability to have that happen is one that's completely dead to itself. And so it was from these experiences that I learned that art is not a convenience. It's not something that looks pretty. It's the next portal when you're making that journey
Yeah.
within yourself from God, from spirituality into the physical world.
Yeah.
It's the most direct portal.
Yeah. No, I as a musician, I feel you on those levels.
Yeah.
Just going out, going out and performing and almost losing yourself in it. Like, you almost don't even remember it. And you did things like that were just unique to that performance. Like, it was just, you were in the moment and you hit it. Like, you were hitting notes that you couldn't hit. Like, I've done that before, and it feels, it's powerful. And that's why it's something that I go out and actively do, because it's a therapy. You're projecting this deep understanding of an emotion, and you want to share it with other people so that they can relate to you on that level and make a connection. And it seems like art in general is that struggle to make a connection. Even if you don't know that that's why you're doing it, that's what you're doing. Like, even just getting it down on getting anything down on paper and getting it out, you're trying to create understanding. You're trying to create connection.
And I mean, that connection, the reason why it's valuable, I think, is because the process of this channeling and sharing is by its very nature cleansing. Because you're reminding yourself, when you step out of the picture and just let things go, that what the higher reality actually is. And so it's not just about solving a puzzle. It is, because it exists at this higher form of knowledge, but it's an opportunity to sort of step out of yourself, and for the most amount of people in the most amount of ways, like, speak directly in your soul. And by the way, this isn't just true for those who are creating music or art of any kind. It's just as true. I have for the listener, for the viewer. I have this idea that when a person is listening to someone else, they're doing more work than the person speaking, because the listener not only has their own preconceived ideas, they're also actively trying to decode and absorb what the other person is saying. Whereas the other person just has what they're saying.
Yeah.
So the listener actually exists on two tracks of consciousness simultaneously, whereas the speaker only exists on one. So whenever a listener understands something a speaker is saying, they're doing an incredible amount of work that's maybe as much or more so than the speaker themselves. So when a person encounters a form of music or art that speaks to them, it's as though they're creating it in themselves. They too are channeling these forms, and that's why people are moved by them.
Yeah.
They cry too. They laugh. They do all these sorts of things because they're part of that creative process, because they're essentially the piano players playing that Bach and learning that Bach and going on that journey, but with the way they play it.
Yeah.
And so that's the beautiful thing about art in another sense, is that, the channeling doesn't stop with the one person. The channeling is recreated and shared with every person who touches it.
Yeah.
And that's why it's a more present thing in this world, and that's why it's a beautiful thing to hold on to, that simply spiritual expression and sense of self and maybe the world of imagination can't quite yet touch. and it's important to cultivate that faculty. But I think for right now, it would be a good idea to take a break. What do you think?
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Vibe Check with Zach and Kris.
This is Vibe Check with Zach and Kris.
And we're back to our show with Zach. That's me.
And Kris, that's me.
We were speaking about art previously, its values, its benefits, the way it can change a society for the better. And it doesn't have to be stuck in a museum. It doesn't have to be the property of the elite.
No.
It belongs to all of us.
Everyone can create it. Everyone can learn from it. It's a very important thing that is undervalued in society. And we gotta make that change.
We got to make that change. I'm talking to you. Us. We can all do it. We got to learn. We can do it. But I want to talk about one weird trick that your doctors... how's that internet ad go? Like one weird... whatever. Okay. So there's one weird side effect that happens when you're channeling, when you're in a flow state about art, which is that we find that any experience where you're moving into the deeper parts of yourself, into the more spiritual parts of yourself, doesn't just mean that you create or that you understand or that you use art or beautiful things just by itself. A lot of sort of side effects come along. And we talked about one of them, a couple of them previously, intuition, conscience. When you're actively in the state where art is beautiful and it's coming from this deeper place, intuition and conscience also come along for the ride because they come from these higher places. So when the door is open, it doesn't just mean the light comes through and that's it. And it goes into one particular channel. All that light comes in.
It spreads through all the cracks.
And spreads, yeah, exactly. And what's beautiful, that's where we call it a flow state. I mean, I don't like calling it a flow state because it's like corporate spirituality, and I don't mean corporate in the style of the Catholic Church, because corpus, whatever. I mean, yeah, it's used in business speak to say, oh, your worker is working really well, and it's probably a spiritual thing, but don't talk about it, just let it happen.
The flow state.
Yeah, but when you're in a state where you're harmonizing with your inner self, and like these more beautiful spiritual things that exist within you, you often find that there's another element that comes into being, which is the intuition, the conscience, but also that things just seem to work where they shouldn't. Sometimes we've run into experiences where a strange series of coincidences sort of happen. I've been talking with a friend of mine about it lately, the concept of synchronicity, where the inner self matches the outer outcomes of the outer world, meaning that sort of coincidences happen. You see symbols, you think of certain things, and they just show up around you. But I would argue that this happens when you're in a certain inner state. It doesn't just happen all the time. You have to be in a place where the outer world and the inner world are closer together, and that's deeper within yourself. So I don't know how to explain that. I guess I mean by that is this world that we live in, physically, and the metaphysical things that are behind it, as well as ourselves, when you go deep enough into that spiritual realm, they're actually made of the same stuff.
Yeah.
Right? So when you get to that root of the flower of our being...
Go with it.
Yeah, root of when you're there, that root touches outside of you and inside of you and harmonizes in the exact same place. And I think one of the special experiences of art is that might be the most immediate and easy connection to that state of being that introduces people to a life better lived, where the world sort of bends to you as you walk in a kind of way.
It definitely feels that way. it gives you at least that empowered art gives you that feeling because you're the creator at that moment. You are the one making the moment happen, making the creation happen, putting the ideas down and getting them out. So it gives you that sort of a feeling of control, even though you come from a place that is so vast and just, the imaginary world, and you're pulling something through that is abstract, but not abstract enough for people to not understand it on some sort of frequency.
And because a lot of what you're pulling out in like the Jungian analysis of synchronicity or just other things he analyzes is that they're symbols. There are deeper archetypes. I mean, if you go further back, there's probably things deeper than that. And those things permeate our psyches as they do the world, the entire world around us. So when you're trafficking in things that are deep and beautiful, that gives you a sense of control in a certain sense, because like, wow, you're holding these beautiful cards in your hand and you get to sequence them and order them in a way that feels right to yourself. But the objects that you're holding come from a world that's before you. Like you can't come up with a piece of art or music that has no like abstract platonic higher form to itself. Like you can't just, I don't even know how to begin to describe this. I guess it's like you can't come up with a shape that's not a shape abstractly.
Yeah.
Like you can't come up with like a mega triangle that only you have the ability to metaphysically write into being.
Yeah.
Is that, I mean,
yeah. There's constructs. You're working within constructs.
And, yeah. So you're dealing, you have a deck of cards that you get to play with, and that make you feel alive, because wow, like this is when you put this here, this here, this here, this is right, and then you start to see it in your outside world when you're really in depth with it. But the reason you do is because those cards come from the previous the back layer, the root of everything, and I mean that's one aspect of this flow state, but in terms, not just in terms of like scene matching symbolism, but even like we talked about, just the simple process of asking God for things somehow works.
Yeah, the almost more instant manifestation of things. When you're asking specifically, when you project it to the universe and actually ask for it, it's like you send out a beacon of light, like, hey, a little bit of energy over here, please. Like, just a little bit of focus for like a moment. And, it's like when you're in the airplane and you really need some help, you don't just yell for, you ding the button and you hope eventually someone shows up, and that's sort of the way that you're reaching out into the
dinging the button is a very important metaphor here.
It's because do you really expect them to show up immediately when you press that button? No, but at least it's an acknowledgement to that, like, that spectral world that, hey, I could use a little spiritual help over here, like.
No, the reason I'm clinging on to the dinging the button for the attempt.
No, that just came up. No, and I was like, that great. Actually really works.
I'll tell you why. Because that means that there's an actual protocol into asking those questions and seeking answers. That protocol is existing in that portal within ourselves that we talked about.
Yeah.
Where like it's not like we actually have to be at a portal of this fiber optic cable that connects the light between ourselves on the outside and our deepest inner selves.
Yeah.
And if we're not at the end, the terminal end of that thing, like, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work the same way. And so, like, you actually have to press the button. You have to be in that state of flowing intuitive existence that can be channeled and brought into through art, because it connects these worlds together. When you're already there, things start happening. And when also you're there, like, the conscious thoughts of your mind start harmonizing with the deepest desires of your soul, which also exist on a metaphysical level at the same place as we talked about with the outside world that comes to greet it.
So check it. I just had a good like vision in my head. It's so like, you know how the subconscious mind controls the conscious mind. So you look at that on the spiritual like spectrum, and so there's the physical world and there's the spiritual world. So that spirit world is the subconscious world, and it manifests into the physical world. And that works on your personal level, and that works even on the grander scale of reality. Like,
it's all permeating.
Yeah.
Because you're right. People like to think, oh, we're controlling this thing. No.
Your thoughts show up before your actions do most of the time.
Yeah.
You know?
So
like,
it's actually, so what we're getting to is when you open that doorway, you're not actually asking for anything. You're always in the state of asking, and now the doorway is open.
Yeah.
Because that asking, that deep desire of the soul, doesn't even exist in your thoughts. It's just there, and now you're allowing it to bend the world accordingly and run into your conscious thoughts simultaneously.
Yeah.
So it reaches a frame of reality both within and without the moment you let yourself be in that state of existence. In other words, you're not dictating a question to God.
Yeah.
You're allowing the questions to God within you be heard and brought into this world in the form of answers that you don't comprehend, because you allow yourself to have that happen. You allow yourself to be in that state of a communication channel between all the various layers of your being and existence, and you just let that happen. Now, all of this sounds really crazy, but what I'm trying to get to is there is a logic to the way when you enter a flow state and things seem to work and people seem to get it and things seem to happen. They're not just random. There's a logic behind it. And this is the closest philosophy, I would say, theology has gotten over the years that I can sort of spit out and say, yeah, there is actually an order to these things. There's a reason why these things happen. People have studied very deeply. People have a hard time putting it in straightforward words. But rest assured, what you put in comes out. But that's because what you put in when you're in a state of flow is already within you waiting to come out. That's the simplest, not simple. That's the most, I don't want to say profound because that's tooting my own horn. I just want to say that's my best understanding of the mechanics of these things. And,
Yeah.
the reason why the mechanics are important is because, as I said, we're not trying to say like, oh yeah, it totally just like happens and the world just like is open to you. Like we require in our sort of westernized brains more than just a promise of, yeah, you just believe and it'll happen. If we manage to work on using our conscious intellectual minds to be comfortable with something that happens naturally to us
Yeah.
in an emotional and spiritual way, then we'll know, okay, this is not a scary thing.
Yeah.
This is a comforting thing. And while I would have liked to do this over and like put this in even more straightforward terms, I want people to hear this because so they know that these aren't coincidences or just things that happen to exist. There's a very deep logic that's been worked on for thousands of years.
There's something to that too. When you really start to understand that like there aren't coincidences and a lot of things happen for a reason, that's when you can really start to explore the value in situations that you might not understand that put you in emotional chaos, because you're like, oh my goodness, there's all this weighing down on me. But once you start to explore it, like, okay, what's the puzzle here then? You know, what is there for me to understand from this situation that it's obviously bothering me so much? And so once you actually start diving into it, you realize, oh, there's lessons here. Let me pull these lessons out. And then it's like you're taking away from the negative power of that experience and turning it into a positive experience so that it can no longer like hurt you.
Yeah, your conscious mind, when told to go on a mission, of discovering these deeper truths that you know happen,
Yeah.
that conscious mind is the vanguard. It's the forefront of confronting difficult things. So if you orient it to a point of, we can take the difficult thing and bring it deeper and process it and understand it, instead of having the orientation of like, oh, I'm going to struggle with this without the help of my inner being.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that changes everything for our ability to process the most difficult things, because we're enlisting an arsenal of ourselves to deal with things, instead of just saying, oh, only our mind is going to take care of it, when it's not. It never does. Like, it's a form of neurosis is trying to get the mind to solve an emotional problem that it has no capability of doing, because it doesn't even function at the level of whatever the emotion is coming from.
Yeah.
So it's like attacking the same thing.
Yeah, using your mind, like your logical brain, to attack an emotional problem without a spiritual, like, it's like a checks and balances system. If you're only like emotional and mental, you need, like, it needs that second person to really, that second idea, that second concept, that spiritual attachment to also go with the logic to fight the emotion, so that it can,
resolve the emotion.
It resolves it. Yeah, that's
by
like,
giving it the bigger picture of like, hey, you know how you felt about that time you were humiliated and then someone mistreated you and you like feel like you're nothing. Your spirit is coming in and saying, oh, did you know that you're eternal, and that like when you're in my state of being, everything makes sense. And even though you don't understand that now, you should understand emotionally that like, no, you're going to learn from this situation. The pain doesn't define you, and you actually exist in a place where everything can be in harmony with you and yourself. So you don't have to say that, oh, I'm forever doomed because like I'm forever not valued by other people, when actually I have infinite worth within myself. So, like, I don't know. I'm just giving a sample situation, but the spiritual world is going to be summoned by the logical brain in these sorts of situations to say the emotions, like, there's a bigger world than what happened a week ago. That's a much bigger world.
Yeah.
And you might not understand how much bigger that world is, but you will know that you will get the fact drilled into your mind, and your emotions especially, that the world is bigger than 1 week. It's bigger than one person.
Yeah.
It's bigger than, like, one insult in one direction or another. And to sort of cycle back to art before we end the show, like, art is the closest and most accessible set of reminders to ourselves that there is more to our being than just logic, and more to our being than just emotion, and more to our being than just spirituality. They actually all connected, and they can all function to inform each other. And we when we process art or make art, we involve all three. I mean, spirituality to come up with the deeper symbolisms and ideas, the emotions to sort of translate that in a way that people can feel.
Yeah.
And the logical side is the one that executes these things. It says, oh, well, I got to draw this over here, or I've got to sing it this way.
Yeah. The importance of that artistic expression in order to make something almost more concrete than an emotion, so that the logical brain can actually, kind of have its way with it, instead of just tackling a feeling. Like, the logical brain cannot just attack a feeling. It doesn't know what to do with that. It needs a lot of context.
And it needs to be distracted. Like, what I find when I sing is that it distracts my logical mind enough to let the other two sides of myself take over and deal with the problem. And sometimes the logical side, it's important to be engaged. Like, when I'm writing, maybe my logical side will engage with the other two faculties and sort of decipher what's going on an immediate level, and then be able to move on to the bigger and bigger pictures. But no matter what, like, forms of expression, fortunately, are our one gift to engage everything we have. Whereas, unlike being able to just pick one thing at a time and get stuck, because the logic is not going to solve the emotional problem. The emotion's not going to solve a logical problem. Have you ever tried doing that? That doesn't work.
Yeah.
You can't use your soul to solve, like, a fist fight, and you can't use What's the other one? You can't use your emotions to solve a spiritual problem, which is kind of what a lot of people try to do because they don't know any better.
Yeah,
I think it's fair to say.
it's just if you don't have that triangle, you don't have that third counterbalance to logic and emotion, because the spiritual is what ties those two things together. It's where the chaos and the perfect order meet and go, here we are.
Here's the bigger picture.
Yeah, here we are, but you're not seeing it the way that we see it over here in the spiritual world.
I think it's fair to say that we'll do. This is an introduction. We'll be able. Might be overwhelming, but
Yeah.
we'll break this down as time goes on because that's why we're here. Now, you might not have caught all of our video because I was not smart enough to charge the camera the whole time.
I'm pretty sure it died a little while ago, but that's okay because we've still got this.
Yeah, and we're learning. And but I hope next time you'll be able to see us the whole time. And secondly, we'll pick one of these concepts that we just threw out at you like...
Yeah, we just went a little intense on this one because we could.
Because we could. But but that makes it such that, well, we have a lot of material to work with.
We've got a lot of things to explore with you now that we might have thrown an overwhelming concept at you. Now we can sort of tackle each and attach them back to old ideas from other episodes and new ideas, and it'll all make more sense as long as you just keep listening.
Yeah,
And if you don't get it the first time, listen to it again. There's no harm in listening to the information more than once, because you might get something new every time.
Well, and not just that. I mean, I don't think our listener base is any wider than people we know. So feel free to contact us when we go off the deep end.
Yes. If you have a problem with what we say, we would love to discuss anything.
Yeah.
Because we're here not just to throw claims into the ether, but to create discussion.
Yeah, and just to hopefully provide some sort of guidance, or I don't know if guidance is the right word. Maybe
It's a guidance. It's just a little more freeform than you might be used to.
no, it's more. It's like, okay, there is a path forward for all of us. We're struggling. We're trying to figure it out too, but we're all in this together. Kris and I have just been struggling with the exact same things for a very long time, so we're just trying to pool our insight into this problem.
Yeah.
I think this is a good point to say. See you next week. Enjoy your week.
Enjoy your week, and we hope you get to see our next episode of Vibe Check with Zach and Kris in its entirety.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Have a good one, guys.
This is Vibe Check with Zach and Kris.